How big was he, Kevin?
Pardon?
How big was Brian Clay at the time? Like when he threw that discus, how big was he?
He was 5'9" or 5'10", and competition weight at that time of the year, he was usually right around 168 to 170.
Really?
Yeah.
So what was his best event in the decathlon? Like that he excelled in? Like for my instance, Michael Smith was, I still think Michael Smith holds the shot put record for decathletes.
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, as much as he was a sprinter, jumper, and a hurdler, he still holds a world record in the decathlon discus at it's what he threw there in Beijing.
Wow.
54:30, I think, something like that. At the same time, I think his best throwing decathlon was in 2005 in Helsinki, where he threw 1640 something in the shot put, threw 52 meters in the discus, and threw 72 meters in the javelin. So for being a little guy, his throws were, I think his throws were really second only to Mike Smith's in terms of the quality of, just throwing in a decathlon. But, it is the model that was out there that, that was really kind of laid down by.
Like you're going into the windmill. Looks like you're going into the windmill.
That was, really kind of put out there by Dan O'Brien, or maybe even Chris Huffins a little bit before that, was, just the speed and power. And I think, his speed and power stuff on day one, I think put him in a position to really kind of put pressure on people, to kind of have to do things. I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but, like with Dave Johnson, those guys were, aren't around a whole lot anymore. Dave just, with his pole vault and his javelin, his 15, Dave knew, he was okay being down by a couple hundred points, because he knew he was going to vault 530. He knew he was going to throw 74 meters, and then run 420. So yeah, I think of Brian, I think of him as a sprinter jumper, but at the same time, his throws were really, really good.
That discus throw there was fantastic, straight down the middle and everything. Absolutely fantastic.
So Kevin, before we get started, were you a decathlete yourself?
While I was in school, I was a sprinter, hurdler. And then, picked up and started doing the decathlon, really kind of post-collegiate, when I, kind of became a training partner of Dave Johnson's.
Okay.
What's always amazed me is, and I don't know about every single Olympic cycle, but the guys who are that good could qualify for the U.S. championships or the Olympic trials in all of those events. Like, it's just crazy how good they are.
Yeah, we've talked sometimes about, look at Brian, look at Ashton, Kevin Meyer. Think about doing a decathlon against one of those guys. Even if you're a Power 5 coach, could you compete with those guys in the decathlon? One guy versus 10 of your best?
Nope.
There's not very many, programs, that have if we just, let's use Brian's marks, how many programs have a 10-300 guy, an 8-meter long jumper, a 16-meter shot putter, a 214 high jumper, 47 flat quarter miler, 13-4 hurdler, 54-meter discus thrower, 540 vaulter, 72-meter javelin thrower. There's not many like full programs that could put 10 of those people, 10 of those guys out there.
What's really interesting is, I don't know if you guys know this, but when I was doing some work with Nike in 2007, Rudy Chapa, who started Spark, which is no longer around because Spark got bought by Nike and then it folded, but they used Brian Clay as the actual person that you would compare yourself to in the point systems.
Yeah, they came out when right after 2008, when Brian was still with Nike, Spark came out and they wanted to test him.
Yep.
You know, run him through the things. And I mean, and except for a couple of the soccer skills that were a little bit, you know, that required a little bit of lateral movement, you know, that, you know, and he'd never done or seen any of these tests prior to. And yeah, they were blown away. I mean, he was in the upper percentile of almost every test they did, you know, including, you know, he on the med ball throws, he was in the top 2 percentile with, you know, NFL offensive linemen. And it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I remember that when we were meeting down in Portland. Really interesting.
So, like I said, when I was sitting, I kind of went through this whole information, and I, you know, like I said, I was just thinking about who I was talking to, and, you know, every time I'd sit down, I kind of go through it. I kind of went a different thing. So what I really did was, you know, kind of like what we did, right, you know, like what we're doing right now. And I just kind of put down just some general thoughts that we'll go through, but you know, I'd really love if this was just more interactive. And you guys can really kind of, you know, like I said, I'll lay out, you know, kind of our thought process, which is, it's still my general process, you know, in programming now, you know, but just, you know, like I said, I think one of the biggest strengths of this group is, you know, the discussions that we have. So hopefully it just kind of stimulate some thought, and we'll kind of go from there. So let me pull this up. Okay, you know, just in, you know, in programming, again, it's just, you know, this, you know, kind of my thoughts and different parameters that I look at, and kind of putting this together, you know, but just kind of starting and putting together a training plan, you know, we really just, you know, we had to work backwards, you know, and whether we were looking at planning for a quadrennium, you know, or even down into the yearly. We're looking at our quadrennium planning, you know, 4 years away, you know, base strength. You know, this was the time, you know, that we put a little more emphasis on some of our events that, you know, weren't where we wanted them to be. High volume. And what you're going to notice is with a lot of what we did, technique and speed were a constant, you know, through every phase. Even as it got, you know, more and more advanced down the line. But, you know, 4 years out, we were base strength, technique, and speed, high volume, and working on some of the events that we felt like we needed to spend some extra time in. 3 years out, base strength, now with a little bit more emphasis on power, technique, and speed. And, you know, obviously you're there. And this is where we began to focus a little bit more on, you know, event commonality, trying to pair up, you know, particular events that work well together, you know, in terms of biomechanics and, you know, take advantage of similar positions, you know, from one event to the other. 2 years out, again, power, speed, technique. I mean, that's the theme throughout almost everything we did. And confidence. I really think a big piece of Brian's success, you know, at least in his head, was, you know, being in a small school setting at a place like Azusa. You know, he did the nationals, you know, for me one time. He did it his freshman year, and after that, you know, because we were lucky enough to be, you know, in a position where we're chasing championships, you know, on the team side. And obviously he was much more valuable, you know, to the team doing, you know, 3 to 4 different events rather than just doing the decathlon. So he really only did the decathlon, you know, at the national championships for 1 year. But after that, you know, in terms of confidence, I think it allowed him, you know, kind of a unique opportunity to be able to go to the NAIA national championships. And, you know, he became an All-American. He was an All-American in the hurdles and the long jump and the discus and the javelin and the pole vault. in the relay. He was able to be successful, you know, in his individual events at a national level. And obviously, you know, he's able to, you know, to bring home some awards. He was a 30+ time All-American in his collegiate career between indoors and outdoors. And I think it was, you know, again, I think unique to being in a situation like the NAIA. I think the success that he had in his individual events, I think really gave him a big boost of confidence to be able to do that. You know, but the confidence is just being able to translate, you know, into, you know, what you're doing on Saturdays at track meets, you know, the same kind of stuff, you know, and, you know, in there with confidence, I put high intensity, you know, and a lot of that's just duplicating what you're doing Monday through Friday, being able to come back and duplicate those same kind of efforts at a track meet on Saturday. And, you know, and a big part of it, and we'll get into a little bit of this, but, you know, a lot of times our intensity was pretty high, and, you know, a little bit different than some other things. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, we just, you know, we weren't looking to do anything special on Saturday. We just kind of wanted to recreate on Saturday what we had done Monday through Friday, you know, again, throw a little bit of rest in there. You know, so that, I mean, and that was our quadrennium planning, but then the yearly planning, you know, depending on our type of year, we ran on 4 to 6 week cycles, and early in the year, they were longer, you know, they were 6 week cycles. And as we got closer and needed a little more rest and recovery, those back down to 4 week cycles. And, you know, that's a 3 week of work, you know, followed by a week of, rest and recovery, you know, and through the fall, there were 6 weeks, again, you know, with focuses on fitness, strength, technique, speed, endurance. As we transitioned into the winter, again, still 4 to 6 week cycles, you know, and when we transitioned from 6 to 4, you know, kind of would just depend on how far we were looking out, you know, what the indoor schedule may or may not have looked like. You know, and then once we got to the spring, I mean, once we got through the winter, you know, we'd get through, you know, February, and even with, you know, indoors out there, indoors was never really more, you know, it was never an emphasis, you know, even though, you know, he was fortunate enough to win, you know, a few medals at World Indoors and do that kind of stuff. Everything that we did indoors was just, it was still prep for outdoors. You know, the only kind of, you know, I don't necessarily like this word, but the only kind of peaking that we did for indoors was really just built-in additional rest. Okay, because we didn't want to, you know, try to, you know, double peak or anything. We just, you know, all the training was written on, you know, was backed up from what was scheduled to happen in August and September, and, you know, the whole indoor schedule, February and March. We stayed to that plan. We just kind of built in some additional rest to what we were doing. So that's, you know, kind of the general training that we did. And the base on that is just working backwards from, you know, whatever the end of the season might look like. The base of the training that we did, it was 400 meter speed endurance training. Big emphasis on technique. I mean, it always had to be right no matter what. But it was all speed endurance. I mean, and, you know, those 3 workouts that are up there, that was kind of our staple, you know, 4 times 300 meters descending. And, you know, depending on the time of year, you know, we'd start at, you know, with the heart rate recovery, which usually was around 5 to 7 minutes, you know, we'd run 42, 40, 38, 36, or 40, 38, 36, 34. You know, whatever that was. It was all about descending. And again, it was fast. We never really did over distance. We never ran 500, 600s, that kind of stuff. And the interesting thing, you know, again, in the next staple workout, 6 to 8 150s, 150 meters was something that was really, really inside Brian's wheelhouse. he could kill. Like I said, that's the when I say fast, him running 14.5 is not an exaggeration. He'd run 150s and absolutely kill it. And 300s, yeah, we did that work, but mentally it was always a struggle for him. I mean, he felt, even though he could run 33 flat, you know what? It was always a big push to get him to run the faster ones. He hated doing it. He did it, but he didn't like it. So we'd come back and do the 150s and, similar type of work. And even though it was still hard on him physically, the mental side, it was easy to him. He's not running 300s. All I'm running is 150s. And that was something that he felt was that he could do, relatively easily. And we got a lot of work done that way, and when we wanted more strength, we'd shorten up the rest. And that still didn't change kind of his mindset. To him, he was still running 150s and, we're just shorter rest. So that it kind of worked well on especially for him on the mental side, and then the other, really foundational piece to, my program in general and specifically to him was, on Mondays, we ran longer hills, longer duration on shorter rest. And on Fridays and this, we do this throughout the entire fall and into the winter. And on Friday, we'd come back with shorter efforts with longer rest on, a variety of different hills. So that was kind of our staple workouts that we'd kind of work from, and just kind of going through again, just like I said, I thought about it, a lot of different things kind of going through this, but just, the importance of rest kind of being, built into the program and how important that is. But at the same time, coming right after that, I talk about training tired, and developing that confidence, to do things on tired legs, and to be able to go through. And I think, in my opinion, I think high jump is probably one of the most stressful events on the body, where you're building up. High jump is all about converting horizontal velocity to vertical velocity, and there's got to be one point in time where that conversion takes place. And, that's hard. It's a violent ballistic move. And, you got to be able to do that, on tired legs with, 3 events under your legs. When you travel internationally, the schedule that we have in the US, they run on, hey, you get a half an hour rest. That's all you get, so, you're either doing it on tired legs and coming to the high jump, after going almost kind of nonstop for, 2.5 hours, or even internationally, now all of a sudden, you got a little break, after the shot put, go, grab a shower, grab lunch, but it's still more time in the day, so being able to do things on tired legs, being able to come back the second day and have the confidence to jump and jump on big poles, in the pole vault, when we're, 8 events into it, and being able to do that. So, it's a delicate balance, but you got to be able to build that, that confidence that it can still happen on tired legs, especially with, locking in on technique and that kind of stuff. Another component that we worked on a lot was, kind of balancing, again, looking at how much rest is needed, what our overall volume, for that day is, for that week is, for that cycle is. The individual speed work that we did, I would say, for a sprinter, that was as good as Brian was. We didn't do a whole lot of it. A lot of the speed work that we did was built into the hurdles. It was built into our long jump approaches. Yeah, and there was times where we would do our frequencies and our flies, but a lot of that speed work in terms of, when we were working on turnover, a lot of that was built into, our event work. Again, especially if we were in a space where, where we needed to pay attention to volume, and if there was a lot of things that we needed to get done, we would work that stuff in there. And this next part, I mean, and it kind of, as I was thinking through this, I and listen to kind of, everything that we've been talking about, here. And, it just really kind of reinforced what we did. The importance of we had a physio and a team doctor, that we had access to really almost on a daily basis. And whether that's small little upkeep, dealing with specific issues, that was really, really important. Just having that be a part of our schedule. Nutrition, I think I doubled up on that, but on the nutritional side, we never really, we addressed it and we thought about it. But we actually talked to a couple of nutritionists about this, and it really kind of came down to quantity versus quality, and we had really actually our nutritionists that we spoke with, really, to a point, she's like, no, I'm not giving you a green light to go do whatever you want to do. She's like, but, and we did all this, the homework, and all this, parameters kind of go into this, and she really looked at us and said, she's like, what you guys are doing, you guys are burning, close to 6,000 calories a day. Hey, go for it. Eat whatever you want. There's, she's like, there's only so, she's like, I don't know if you can eat really healthily, really be healthy with your diet and consume 6,000 calories a day. So I know, she's like, I know you don't want to be losing weight early in the season, I think, somebody asked earlier, kind of, what he competed at, physiologically, he was usually, we'd get him through November and December. He'd usually be at 190, maybe 195 pounds. And then really with no nutritional adjustments, nothing like that, just the change in training as the training got more specific and got faster, every year by June, he'd be 182 to 183 pounds. And then in late July, August, September, whenever the major was, he was usually 168 to 170 pounds. That's just kind of how he'd put it on, he'd get stronger. And then, as the workouts, as the intensity increased, he'd begin to drop weight, but he wouldn't lose any strength. Like I said, the nutritionist said, be smart and just use, the basic general nutritional guidelines you learned when you were in elementary school. Other than that, number one thing you need to do is intake, 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, which is a lot. She's like, I don't know if I've ever even had this conversation with anybody else about bringing in 6,000 calories a day. So just that was, again, a balance between, quantity and quality. In terms of sleep, rest, and recovery, that was always a big piece of what we were doing. And, luckily, Brian was, again, very internally motivated and disciplined, and the sleeping, obviously I would build rest into our training plans, but, Brian's, his nighttime activities and that kind of stuff, he was, really kind of a coach's dream to where, he enjoyed going to bed early and, and at that point, if he didn't, get up early in the morning for weights, because we'd lift in the mornings, and then take a break before we got on the track in the afternoon, that was never really a struggle for him, so in terms of the sleep, and what the recovery and the regeneration that he was able to pick up while he was sleeping, that was always a pretty easy part, because that was just kind of part of who he was. It wasn't about, convincing him the importance of it, for his success on the track. He just, enjoyed going to bed early and getting up early. He wasn't that sleep-in guy.
Hey, Kevin, what's his weight now?
He's
Just out of curiosity, because I wanted to see if he was competing at about 168, 170 pounds, he didn't lose a lot of strength. But naturally, what is his body weight where he should be at? Because it's kind of interesting. He's gone from 190 down to 168. That's 22 pounds.
Yeah, I would get. I mean, this is my guess, just because I mean, as I've seen him, he's still stayed pretty fit. I would say he's probably 175 to 180 pounds.
Oh, okay. Not much of a variance.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, this next part, a big piece of what we did was our warm up and cool down. You know, I have a 3-inch thick 3-ring binder of warm ups and cool downs that we use on a daily basis. And, you know, I was lucky enough to, to go through that. And, you know, part of, you know, I learned a ton early in my career from Lawrence Seagrave and what he was doing with the Speed Dynamics program. But each, you know, depending on the day, depending on the workout, we had a different warm up and a different cool down, you know, that was specific to kind of what we were doing for the day. You know, in terms of my role as a coach, I think, I mean, it's warm up time is a very, very important time of the workout. It's, you know, you can observe a lot, you know, on the body language of the athletes. You know, you kind of listen to them talk. And, you know, I mean, as much as I had a plan all written out, you know, to me, my plan was always kind of written down in pencil. And, you know, I have copies of, you know, I always kept just a little notebook where I'd make adjustments to the workout on the fly if I needed to. But yeah, workouts were in pencil. It were all, you know, it was all planned out, but there was always a little bit of flexibility to it, depending on, you know, what we were doing and how we were feeling for the day. And, you know, sometimes there was just days where, you know, there wasn't very many of these, but, you know, there were a couple of days like, yeah, today's not the day. Go home, do whatever you want to do, come back tomorrow. Like I said, there wasn't very many of those, but there were times where it's just, you know, you just see things, you listen to the self-talk, and just sometimes it's not there. So to me, the warm-ups and the cool downs are really, really important, one physically, but they're also very important, you know, just observing it and getting ready. The next one, you know, on philosophy is speed kills. You know, there's speed is speed, and you know, there's nothing like, you know, in Beijing, you know, Brian picked up the leading, you know, his name was taken off the bib after the 100 meters, and then it said leading on it, and he held it for the next 24, 48 hours. And to be able to do that, to open up with 100 meters, you know, and long jump and kind of continue to roll through with that, you know, speed is, you know, I think that's showing through with, you know, that was a core piece to Ashton's success. You know, Meyer is a little bit of mix of the two. You got the young Aussie coming now, again, with superior sprinting skills. You know, and all that being said is, as much as I believe in that, and I'd love to keep on working with those, it's got to match the athlete, and how you're programming has to match who that athlete is physiologically, because, you know, as good as Dave Johnson was, you know, and Dave was kind of, Dave could, I think one of his biggest attributes was he was able to stack up a lot of work. Dave could, his recovery naturally was very quick, and Dave was really able to go, you know, day after day after day. He could just keep on piling on the hard work, but he wasn't a speed guy. You know, it takes me back to in 2005, coming off of 2004, Roman Chevrolet had won the gold medal in Athens. Brian was silver, and Brian and his camp, Roman and his camp, they called and they wanted to come out for a training camp. And they came out, and Attila Shaposky was a part of that group. And they came out and they spent about 2.5 months with us, kind of through February, March, and into April. And, we had our program, they had their program. There was times, kind of where it came together. I hope to have some video for that as well, but I couldn't get it transferred to play on the Mac, but I'll try to figure out how I can share that, because there's some pretty good video of that. And, and obviously everything we were doing with Brian was very speed based, and Klaus, and, he came with his group, and they were very tempo based and fitness based. And that's what they did. And, obviously, Roman at the time, he was the world record holder. He's the first, and at the time, the only person over 9,000 points, world champion, Olympic champion, Roman had done it all. So again, and he's come in just a few months after winning the gold medal in Athens. And we're together for, a couple of months. And I look back on that, and I really think that we screwed them up, because I think they came in, they knew what Brian, they knew what he could do and all that kind of stuff. And, they came in and they're doing their longer stuff, and they're doing some long runs. Like we showed them some trails, and they're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. And, all of a sudden they're coming out and they're seeing Brian doing, 30-meter flies at 2.8 seconds. They're watching Brian run 150s, consecutive 150s, repeats under 15 seconds. And, kind of hindsight looking back, I think we messed them up a little bit, because I think they left thinking that, oh, we've got to change this. We've got to start doing more speed. And when we got to Helsinki later that summer, Roman hadn't been injured, or nothing had happened, but he really wasn't the same guy. And I really think they went home and kind of changed up their training to try to compete with Brian on the speed side. And I think it took its toll on him a little bit. And that, it took its toll on Roman. It allowed Attila. Attila actually showed up. He looked pretty good in Helsinki that summer. He actually came away with a medal from that world championship. But yeah, Roman was kind of a different guy when we saw him in August, than when he left training camp at the end of March and into April. So as much as I really believe in the speed component of it, it still has to match up with the physiology of the athlete that you're working with.
So Kevin, does that explain why? Because when you showed that video of Brian Clay, he came dead last with regards to the 1,500 meters.
Doesn't count.
At Beijing. So I guess that's why your philosophy looked at this athlete and you said, this guy is speed dominant. He's got, fast twitch fibers. And fortunately enough, a lot of the sports there involved power, and power is speed times acceleration, or acceleration times force, I think it is. But so with these guys, when they thought that with Brian doing all the speed, that they, like you said, they screwed up because they weren't really looking at the athlete like you had with Brian Clay.
Yeah, and because honestly, you can, not off the top of my head, but you can score some pretty good points in the 100 running 10.9.
Mm-hmm.
And again, without looking at the tables, 10.9, and what you can do in the 100 and the long jump in some of those events, it's still going to score you more points. To score the same points in the 1,500, you're talking about running 4:15, type of times. But at the same time, when Brian in Athens, again, as a speed and power guy, yeah, he did not enjoy the 1,500 meters. but when he needed it, I mean, he really only needed it, you know, in Athens in 2004. You know what? He ran 4:32, 4:33. You know, when he needed it, ran a very well executed race, did exactly what he needed to do. You know, but up until then, you know what? I think he always kind of went back to, you know, the story. I mean, Dave Johnson used to always tell it. You know, when he made his first Olympic team, you know, Dave used to tell a story when he was, you know, the '88 trials in Indianapolis. You know, it was just all about, hey, all I got to do is finish this race. I don't want to step on the curb. I don't want to do, I don't want to risk anything. All I got to do is finish, and I'm on the team, or I've won my medal. And, you know, I think that just kind of got in the back of Brian's head. And, you know, if he didn't need it, you know, he didn't need it, you know, talk about his, you know, a couple of his biggest wins. He didn't need it to win the world championships in 2005. He didn't need it to win the gold in 2008, you know, so he just kind of started and finished the red. You know, he needed it to win the silver in 2004, and he found it. So the next part of this, I mean, I you know, not so much on the training side, but especially on the combined events planning thing, you know, we were, you know, we tried to be really completely autonomous in how we set up our travel. You know, in 2 Olympic games, Brian never stayed in the village. We set up our own housing. We set up our own travel schedule. Obviously it took some coordination between us and USA Track and Field. And lucky enough at the time, there was a gentleman by the name of Aaron McGuire, who was a former decathlete here in the U.S., was actually one of the managers for the USOC. And we had a good relationship with him. And the only thing he asked of us was that we communicate with him, you know. So we did that. We let him know what we were doing, what our plan was, you know. And I kind of a side story on this. Again, we were in control of every piece of what we did day to day, you know, even to the point to where, you know, we had a great little, you know, house. I mean, I guess you call it an Airbnb by today's vernacular. But we got a house when we were in Athens. And part of that house hooked us up with, I think it was the owners, I think it was her cousin, was a taxi driver. And that was his family business. And he actually, as we got to know him a little bit, he actually had a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Michigan. But he was in Athens driving a cab because that was his family business. And he was literally for a little bit over 2 weeks, he was at our beck and call. We could call it, and if it wasn't him, he would call somebody that he knew that he was trusted. And we had a ride wherever we needed to be. We had a car waiting for us in 5 minutes, you know, and it took us anywhere we needed to go. Again, it was very important for us that we had our circle was small. It was very controllable. And that was important to us. You know, we had fun. You know, we went to training camps. We trained, we worked hard. But there was still a lot of fun. You know what? I mean, we did I don't know if any of you guys have been to Beijing, but again, training camp, pre-Olympics, all that kind of stuff. You know, we still found a day, you know, in our training, we still found a day to go to the Great Wall and go down. They have one of those alpine slides, you know, that kind of goes down the hill. You know, we go down the hill, and obviously Brian didn't walk back up, you know, with where we were, you know, but then we go back up, start walking along the wall. And we come to the end of the touristy type place of the wall, and there's a big fence. Well, we go, I don't remember, around the fence, under the fence, however, we end up on the other side of the fence, you know, where we're not supposed to be. you know, and we saw parts of the Great Wall that that most people don't see, so there was always a little bit of adventure, in there for us. It was always a little bit of fun. In 2003 at the World Championships in Paris, again, got to get out, got to have some fun, got to enjoy it. Still respect while we're there. We were in Paris. We needed to go see the Louvre, and let's go see the Mona Lisa. We did the Louvre in about 15 minutes. You think about that, it's like, that's, most of the most iconic, museums and, places in the world, but we pretty much figured out where we needed to be. We beelined in, it gave the David a quick wave, and we were going along, went in and saw the Mona Lisa, which was kind of our goal, and, kind of made our way back and went back to our housing and, got on with our day. So yeah, we had some fun, but we never really lost sight of kind of what we were doing.
Hey, Kevin, when you had this time off, were you really careful with what type of sort of events that you planned with him? Because I'll give you a classic story. The Canadian ski, downhill ski team was once in Switzerland, and then they all decided to go for a hike the day before they were competing. And it was actually not, how do you say, the hike that they did wasn't part of the training program that they used to do. So they actually developed a lot of sore muscles, and they didn't do so well the next day. Were you very careful with what you were doing with Brian on those off days?
Yeah, we were very cognizant of what we were doing, how much we were going to walk. Like when we went to the wall, we made sure we went to a spot to where, there was a chairlift that would take us to the top. When we came down on those little alpine slides, as much as Brian wanted to do it, he didn't do it. So that was always very much part of our plan. Again, here's a funny story. When we were our training camp before 2004, the training camp was in Crete.
Oh, I lived in Crete.
Beautiful place. Big, huge resort that was just there for USA Track and Field. And, we got to get out. We got to see what's going around. So we ended up walking around and walked down by the beach, and all there's, a bunch of little shops down on the beach. And we're walking by, we're trying to get lunch someplace. And we look in and we see this, gorgeous waitress. So we go in, that's where we're going to eat. And so we start talking to her, and, come to find out that the guy behind the counter who's doing all the cooking, that's her husband. And we get to know these guys, and just a great, great couple. And we start going back there every day. And every day we're going back and we're eating more, and somehow we're paying less. Which is, Nikos, if you live there, that's how those people are.
It's called Greekonomics.
And, super, super hospitable. And, so the night before we're leaving, they want to throw us a big party. So we go there, just the best food ever. It was unbelievable. Well, afterwards, and we're about 5 days out from the start of competition for Brian. At this time, we're getting on a plane to go into Athens the next day. Well, after dinner, they start bringing out the ouzo.
Oh, no way.
And, and Brian, kind of just with his background, on the Hawaiian side, and, didn't want to offend anybody. Well, he's taking their drinks that he's giving them. And then he looks at me and he's like, Kevin, we can't offend these people. They are being way too nice to us. So here you go. And he didn't drink a drop, but I doubled up on everything that came to the table, and the ride, the plane ride to Athens the next day was a little shaky, So yeah, it always played a huge piece to, kind of what we were doing. Obviously, every trip we went on was a business trip. But at the same time, it's a blessing to be able to go and see some of these places and that kind of stuff. But we never lost sight of, really kind of why we were there.
Wow.
But again, back to, travel and competition management. We always really, everything had a plan. In terms of weather, was it going to be hot and humid? Was it going to be cold? We made provisions all the way around, equipment wise. This will ring true to Richie, because, both he and I have, carted poles all over the world, and how do they get here and how do they get there? We were always super, super detailed, in terms of getting our equipment where they needed to get to, getting pole vaulting poles where they needed to get to. And knock on wood, the only miss we ever had with poles was his poles still haven't come back from Athens. But at that time, we weren't stressed about it. We just called UCS and we got another set. But in terms of, because coming home, we just sent them, didn't worry too much about it. But when we were outbound, we went over and above, making sure that everything was guaranteed, and we tracked everything from place to place, and it worked out well for us.
Obviously, you didn't fly Air Canada.
No. But there was really a plan in place for everything. And, and part of the plan was what's going to happen when this doesn't work, and making alternative arrangements and, and just kind of making do with what we have, and, not having to be, on the best track, and, we didn't need a lot of the bells and whistles, as much as it was all there for us. But part of the plan was, the planning when that didn't come into play. The nutritional side, as much as I said, throughout the whole training thing, the nutrition thing was never, a big piece. Like I said, just with getting the caloric intake that we needed, but the week leading into it, we did get a little bit more locked down in terms of, what he had before the meet, what was our plan during the meet. A big piece on our nutritional recovery plan was, no matter what we had going on, we had a big protein-based meal inside 2 hours after he was done. And if that meant he ate when he was in the ice bath, whether he ate when he was in the press room, whatever it meant, but we stayed pretty locked into that 2 hour window to where he had to eat really a protein-based meal. And in Athens, after the first day, the US team coach, we talked to him about it, we had everything planned out, and somehow we didn't get the meal, whatever. And so we're starting to, get a little bit late in our window that we'd like to work within. And he's like, well, I'll figure it out. I'll get it done. I'll get it done. And, so he's in the ice bath. We're waiting on him. And he showed up with like 5 or 6 like chicken skewers. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was a couple 100 grams of protein, kind of what the baseline of what we needed to kind of get, at least through that phase. But physio work, we were lucky enough to have, between our trainers that traveled with us, when possible, we traveled with a doctor, who was able to, and this next piece requires a lot of interaction with, the national governing body and their medical staff. But we always, and usually we won the fight, but sometimes it was a bigger fight than with others. But as much as we could, we always tried to get an IV in between days. And by rule, it's not illegal, but it definitely needs to be prescribed by a doctor, which is why we had our doctor with us. You know, and they did, you know, sometimes it was very easy. But there's also other times where, you know, we'd have to go through, and it was worth the hassle of going through a couple of tests, you know, to kind of prove that he was dehydrated. And I remember one of the biggest fights we had one time was we were in Mallorca, off the coast of Spain, and very hot, very humid. And it was a big battle to try and get the IV for him. Like I said, very hot, very humid day. At the very end of it, the doctor ended up giving in to us and allowing him to get the IV. And I remember the conversation with that doctor when we got back to the track the next morning, because that night they dumped 2 bags of IV into his body. And before he went to bed, he did not get up to pee one time overnight. That's with 2 bags of fluid, you know. And I kind of needed to make a point with the doctor at the time, like going, hey, thank you very much, but you need to know that, you know, you gave him 2 bags last night and he did not get up to pee one time. So obviously, you know, it was a necessary thing. You know, but obviously that takes some, you know, coordination between your personal medical and the NGB medical as well. You know, and then the other thing on the combined event side is just compete, you know, and, you know, what are you going to do to compete? And no matter what's out there, you've got to bring it together and, you know, and find a way just to go out there to compete. You know, kind of to me, this is a great story. Was in 2004, we had got there, and, you know, Brian had won the Olympic trials, and, you know, everything was good, and goes out there. He won the 100 meters, and he's getting ready to long jump. And at the time, the race walk was going on, you know, not on 50K or whatever it was. And one of the Greek ladies was in a medal position when they came back into the stadium. And, you know, he's out there, it's still long jump warm up time, and stadium just goes nuts, you know, with this Greek female kind of coming in. And I think she ended up winning a medal. And all of a sudden I look over at him, and all of a sudden I see him down there taking a knee, and I'm like, what's going on? I was like, you all right? Call him over, you know, and he's got like some tears in his eyes. I'd be like, okay, dude, what's going on? And, you know, and for him, that point when he heard the stadium kind of go nuts, you know, for the Greek athlete, beyond winning the Olympic trials, you know, all that kind of stuff, for him, that was his point where he became an Olympian. You know, in his mind, he was, you know, his entire life, he dreamed about being at the Olympic Games. And for whatever reason, that was kind of his trigger point that, like, hey, I'm at the Olympic Games. And so I kind of, not being super empathetic, you know, just kind of threw it right back at him. It's like, hey, that's great. Let's long jump. You know, we can talk about this afterwards, but right now we need to long jump. You know, but so yeah, just kind of, you know, being able to compete and, you know, and step up and do it when the time is right. You know, and like I said, and we can, you know, I don't know how long I've been talking, but, you know, just, you know, influences on this, obviously, you know, kind of my coach that I had worked with before I took over with, you know, with Dr. Franson. Dave Johnson was a big piece of that. The educational piece that I had a chance to, you know, work with, you know, with the visa program and Harry and Cliff, Les, you know, other people that I've, you know, been able to work with and talk to, you know, kind of around the world, and, you know, athletes that I've, you know, done well with, athletes that I've maybe made mistakes with. You know, this whole thing really has kind of been a village, and it's always kind of fun to, you know, look at that video, you know, that I opened up with, you know, because that's obviously, you know, a great accomplishment for Brian, and, you know, being able to be a part of that obviously is a great thing. But, you know, there, like I said, there was a lot of hits and, you know, and honestly, probably a lot of misses out there kind of leading up into that point as well. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know if that was a little bit scattered. But like I said, I just kind of wanted to kind of throw down some thoughts and, maybe, create some discussion points kind of moving forward.
Yeah, Kevin, one thing I was really interested to, going back a couple of slides, you had confidence in the in the sort of in the program. But what did you, other than him gaining confidence through getting himself ready in competitions on a Saturday before any decathlon, what did you specifically do for that?
A lot of it was, like I mentioned, recreating, the effort on the weekend, on Saturdays at a track meet, recreating the work that we had done all week, and, that way, now all of a sudden we're going to a competition. Obviously there's, more pressures involved and that kind of stuff, but, letting him see that, because, sometimes coaches, will fabricate, sometimes and that kind of stuff. But, for him to see that, because through his whole thing, we never did a whole lot of testing per se. A lot of the testing part of our training, kind of we just did in track meets, and just got our measuring stick that way. Again, because, being on a smaller stage, we were able to go into different track meets and work on different components of what we were working on. And we did a lot of our testing that way. So I think a lot of that was, just his confidence that we were on the right track, doing what we needed to do. Then you throw in, he had a chance to, once he was kind of established, to compete at some bigger meets. And, I think just kind of his personality, he enjoyed, going to a big invitational track meet and long jumping, with the long jumpers, and just going up to these guys and like, yeah, I'm just here to have fun. Hey, you know what? I'm going to beat some of you guys. I may not win this thing, but I'm going to beat some of you guys. Oh yeah. And by the way, I'm going to throw discus afterwards as well. When you guys are done.
I was thinking more in terms of maybe coaching cues that you had that you would have any kind of conversation with them, have within either just before the event or in between events. And
it was always very simple. Always one concept. And sometimes it was positive. And sometimes it was very directed, and I mean, there was a time, this was at the 2004 trials in Sacramento. He had made a couple bars, nothing to really be too proud of, in the high jump, and all of a sudden missed, and, it was an easy bar, but he'd missed on a couple, and he came over and, kind of was looking on his face like, I need this bar. And I just looked at him and was like, you just need to go jump. If you're done fucking around with these other bars, let's just go jump. And that was it, and he ended up coming back and making, 3 or 4 more bars after that. But for the most part, it was, like I said, one word, not super complicated. And sometimes, those cues would change, kind of as a, even inside of one season, depending on what we were working on. But it was also, it was very simple. Just one word cues, that to somebody else, we didn't do it to disguise anything, but it was just something that we knew, that we understood. It really got to the point to where, either one word, or one gesture, you get to the world championships, you get to the Olympic games, and sometimes there's good coaches seating and sometimes there's not, to where I could, we were really to a point where I could be kind of removed a little bit. And as long as he could see me, we we had kind of a communication thing, kind of between us that, I could get to him what I needed to get to him.
Kevin, here's a question for you, or two questions. First and foremost, the first question I have is when you were talking about training, did you do technique before actual training, like technical stuff, and then trained, or did you do the training and then the technique followed? Mainly because I'm asking that because of the concept of fatigue. So what did you prioritize during your days or when you were training Brian? And then the second question is, did you ever factor in adrenaline? What do I mean by that? Our coach, our rowing coach, used to have us, he trained us to about 1,500 meters, no more than 1,500 meters, even though the race was 2K. But he was factoring in the day that we were going to compete, that the adrenaline would take over. Did you ever factor that into your workouts?
Oh yeah, all the time. And training order wise, we always did technique first.
Mhm.
Okay, always technique first, and then we'd finish up the day with whatever the running plan was going to be. And like I said, it was always written in pencil, and most of the time we'd finish it and and get everything done. But there's also times where we'd cut it short. And again, the mental side of Brian with with the 1,500 and the challenges that was, sometimes we'd get 3/4 of the way through, a 1,500 meter workout. And if he was hitting all his splits, we'd cut it off just to cut it off, just for that confidence piece. Okay, you did it. There's no, we don't need to go to the well today for this. You just kind of prove that you're ready to do this. So yeah, we don't need to go to the well today. We're good. We've accomplished everything we need to accomplish for the workout. So doing it at the end, I think always gave us the flexibility to kind of do that.
Great. This has been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Alan, do you want to add
after
anything?
how did you feel after all that ouzo in Crete?
Oh, it hurt. It hurt. It was fun, but it hurt.
So
like,
for you guys,
go ahead, Tim.
have you guys ever done downhill sprinting?
Yes.
Very, very slight downhill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, 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 very slight,
Very slight.
downhill on maximum velocity days.
Because
Yep.
that would put a lot of eccentric load on the body, which will actually cause a lot of DOMs.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, I'm talking slight to where, if you were walking, almost unnoticeable type of
Right.
decline, but just enough to allow a little bit of overspeed.
Yeah, just never more than a 1 or a 2% slope.
Yeah.
Yep.
But couple observations, if I may, Kevin, and question to a couple of points you hit on. Always coach the warm up. There's never a reason not to do that. And writing that final plan, the microcycles, the last couple of microcycles, always in pencil, because you just can't plan for that period. I was almost tempted to say you don't ever train for the 1,500. And some of that has come from, I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time around Daley Thompson, and I was good friends with his coach, and we were often in the same place at the same time. And I can't ever remember him doing it. He may have done it somewhere else, but I can't ever remember him doing a workout for the 15. So going back specifically to Brian, he was very close to winning in Athens. I don't know if that was his best score, but it was a score that may have won on other occasions. So were there any kind of broad changes you made between then and 2008, bearing in mind, you've already said you did the 2005 World Championships. I don't know if you did the 2007 as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, between 2004 and 2008 was, kind of staying healthy, and, we did have a little curveball thrown at us, we went to Worlds in 2007 with a knee injury that he ended up pulling out of. So overall training wise, you know, we kind of stayed with the same plan. You know, and we felt good with where we're at with, you know, technically in all the events, you know, so, you know, just continue to train and get stronger, you know, and refine things was really, you know, all that we had worked on, you know, and from the coaching side, it was 2004 and 2008. I mean, you know, really completely different, you know, experiences from my end, you know, and I know this was similar to Brian as well, but, you know, 2004 was, you know, was a lot of fun, you know, and even though there was expectations, you know, because of, you know, the scores that he had put up and that kind of stuff, it was much more relaxed in 2004. And, you know, again, maybe a little bit more enjoyable. In 2008, you know, and, you know, Harry and I have had a lot of discussions about this when it was kind of a gold or nothing type of 2 days. And, you know, that was stressful. I mean, that night, you know, after he won, you know, he wins. It's kind of funny. He wins. And I've thought about this after the fact, but because I didn't think about it at the time, but have you guys seen the movie Miracle about the 1960 hockey team? It's kind of funny because I didn't think about
Lake
it.
Placid? Wasn't that Lake Placid 1980? 1980.
In 80, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and after they won, you know, and Herb Brooks, they show a shot of him just kind of underneath, just kind of sitting by himself. You know, I can think back, I was kind of in that same spot. I remember when it was all said and done, just kind of somehow I found myself alone in a hallway, and I just kind of had to sit there for a few minutes and just kind of unwind. But a funny story on that was the medal ceremony. It wasn't scheduled until the first session the next day. And so just kind of sitting around, I'm just kind of waiting for him. And all of a sudden I hear some music playing, look up on a monitor. They're getting ready to do the medal ceremony.
What?
And I was somewhere down, you know, inside the stadium. I was like, oh, I can't miss this. So I'm, you know, starting to panic a little bit. All of a sudden I see a door, you know, like with some velvet ropes and stuff around it, look down it, straight shot to the track. So I take off. I'm like running down this hallway. I get about halfway down the hallway and I get tackled by Chinese army. I mean, I really probably should have been shot, but, you know, got back up. By the time they figured out I wasn't, you know, any danger, kind of communicated, you know, what I needed, you know, where I needed to be. So I ended up actually watching that award ceremony from trackside and, you know, then getting escorted back out. But, you know, just really a couple different experiences, even that night, you know, other than, you know, kind of, we sat around, had a couple beers and after that kind of stuff, but it was really just us, you know, it really was just an unwinding time, you know, and then after that, you know, the next week or so, you know, was crazy. And, you know, he was bouncing around doing a little bit of everything, but.
Right. Well, going back to your description then of kind of what you went through in Beijing, could you kind of talk through it? Not quite event by event, but, you know, maybe to where the point was you knew he was going to win, because he had a pretty darn big lead, I think, going into the last couple of events. But could you speak to kind of where you thought you were at during those 2 days?
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, obviously kind of leading up into it. And it was funny at the time, you know, before the first day, I don't know, were any of you in Beijing in 2008? I mean, it was, you know, kind of foggy and cold. And
Hi, I was.
Hey, Joy.
Hi, it's Joy.
You know,
Hi.
but
Sorry, guys.
you know, and you saw, you know, you saw parts of that video when it was raining, you know, and we get to the track and, you know, Brian's pretty excited about it. We all are, you know, and it's just dark, you know, not because of the sun, it's just dark between the dirty air and the storm and everything. And Brian just kind of had this look on his face like, you know, this is my Olympic moment, you know, and it's wet, it's rainy. and he's just kind of sitting there and he's got his headphones in and, you know, not really got time to get going yet, but just getting there. And, you know, Roman actually, Chevrolet kind of walks up to him and kicks him, you know, and kind of like, hey, let's go. You ready to get this started? You know, let's go get warmed up. And that kind of kickstarted him a little bit, you know, but after that, it was, you know, I say it was stressful because of the, you know, the pressures and that kind of stuff. But in terms of how Brian, you know, kind of executed it, I mean, he was very businesslike and just kind of went out and did his thing. You know, there really wasn't, you know, we never looked at, you know, 2 opening fouls at anything, you know, everything, you know, in terms of that, it really kind of came together. You know, he came, you know, typical combined event process. Hey, let's get a good mark. You know, let's, you know, if we're long jumping, we don't need a PR on this first one. Let's get a mark that we can live with. Okay. And he did that. And now all of a sudden, you know, then now we can come back and get after the next 2. You know, we're not worried. I mean, so in terms of that, there really wasn't much there. You know, another thing I can remember is, you know, obviously the pole vault's a big thing, you know, but again, you know, the way Brian competed, it was, you know, relatively stress-free in terms of how the competition unloaded, you know, and then we had a break, you know, we ended up somewhere in that stadium, you know, we found a little place where I think it was like where workers were going because there was cots everywhere and that kind of stuff. We just found a place where we could kind of get away. And, you know, that was the first kind of little bit of a, you know, where we could let our guard down a little bit and just like, okay, we still need to throw a javelin, still need to run a little bit, but we just keep on doing what we're doing. Is, you know, this is going to be a pretty, you know, this is going to be a fun finish to the night, you know? So yeah, other than, you know, the stress and expectations, looking back to how he competed, you know, and, you know, it really kind of fell according to plan, you know, and there's no stresses event wise, you know, different than the Olympic trials. I mean, Brian, you know, and up in Eugene earlier in June, he missed his first 2 heights in the high jump up in Eugene. And I was on that little platform kind of right above the high jump area. And I didn't see the 3rd jump. I walked down the backside of the stairs, heard the crowd go crazy, went back up, and then we kind of continued jumping. I think he jumped 211, you know, kind of after that, after a couple of scary misses. You know, but he could compete, you know, I mean, he was very even keeled, as, you know, kept his head about him. And like I said, you know, yeah, there was expectations and pressure that way, but, you know, the way he competed, you know, kind of made the meet kind of flow very well.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Alan, go for it.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, thank you.
See, when you're doing the 300s, Kevin, and you said you do it on the heart rate, we had a wee group chat as you were talking through. What heart rate did Brian get down to before you let him start the next rep? My second question to Malcolm, when you're talking with Daley Thompson and the coach, was it Frank or was it Bruce?
Oh, Bruce. The Frank thing is a myth.
They had me worried there.
Yeah, no, the Frank thing is a myth.
Yeah, I know.
And I know it's being recorded, so, you know, but.
What, Frank Dick? Frank Dick supposedly coached Daley Thompson?
No, Bruce Longdon took Daley Thompson to his first Olympic gold. Set up his training structure, set up all his PBs, his work ethics, his technique.
Yeah.
And then Malcolm probably tell you better. I've only spoken to Bruce on this. I haven't spoken to Frank.
Because I can tell you right now that Daley Thompson did come to Toronto and train with Andy Higgins as well.
Yeah.
I met him.
Here's a little interesting snippet because a lot of you guys either know or know of Peter Thompson, not related. But Peter was Daley's school teacher. He was at I'm going to say a special school, but not regards to education. I mean, Daley's a very bright guy, but it kind of behavioral thing. And so it was Peter that brought him into athletics, and he was really 100-meter man, high jump man, a little bit of long jump. And as
First coach.
Yes, correct. And as Alan said, you know, the real structure for decathlon came from Bruce, and I would say maybe last year or two he was with Frank before 84. For whatever reason, but I think as you have alluded to, Nikos, he, athletes of that caliber would go different places or go to different camps. I mean, I want to say it was after 84, Daly spent a lot of time in California with the guys there. I mean,
yeah, he was training with Dave Steen and
Yeah.
Greg Heideluk up in Toronto,
yeah.
and
I mean,
Gail
Frank-
Ross Giffen.
Yeah, Frank, he's a good friend. I mean, he is a quiet, brilliant guy, very knowledgeable. Just look at his record of personal coaching. And that's all I say. I mean, you worked with people like Katarina Witt and some of the F1 drivers. I mean, he was just very accomplished in everything he knew, and everything, his planning was great. But just look at who he actually coached specifically to anything, and that's not a knock. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. There were a couple of relatively minor sprinters, you would say that he was successful with, and when he was in London, but that's kind of getting away from the point a little bit. The thing I remember, and this was maybe came about because Bruce and I were good friends. We talk a little bit about the running aspect, the short recovery, and the sessions that Daly seemed to eat up quite willingly were sets of 200s with just 30 seconds between, and maybe 3 sets of those. I mean, the effect would be somewhat similar to the 300s, but that was a strict time recovery. We didn't bother on those about where his heart rate was. And then I think, there was the other thing that sprung to mind, Kevin's reply about technical work. There are ways to increase your tolerance, your endurance and tolerance to technical work without trying to do it after you're already tired. I mean, a bit of a stick in the mud for this. I don't see the point of trying to do technical work if you're tired.
Agreed.
Messes up. But thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Oh no, and Alan, Craig, Kevin, can you answer?
Yeah.
And then one last thing before we do get going, and I'm going to put this thing out there: combined events or multi events?
Combined, it's one event.
Okay, no. Okay, Kevin, take it over, and then we're going to argue.
Don't be a clown.
Yeah, but Alan, I mean, our heart rate recovery when we were on the hills and or the 300s was usually, I mean, we'd get down to between 120 and 130. And then again, on the mental side, and I think this kind of stuck with Brian as well, was I remember, we went to a training session one time when Daly, it was a British training group that had, I mean, it was crazy. It was down in Southern California, they were based out of UC Irvine.
Right.
You're talking Daley Thompson, Chris Akabusi, Derek Redmond, Roger Black, crazy. I mean,
Roger Black.
Roger Black, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
And they just, I forget what workout they were running. And Chris Huffins was around for some reason. And they'd done a bunch of running, and, everyone's tired, and, but everyone's walking around. And I don't know if you guys know Chris. There's a little drama in Chris. And he's laid out on the ground. And Daly, was kind of overseeing the group, and Brian just kind of happened, we happened to be right there. And Daly just walks up to Chris, kicks him fairly hard, and just looks at him. He's like, is there something that you did that these guys didn't do? Because if there's not something else that you did, then you need to get up and start walking around.
Yeah, he was a bastard to train with. I mean, that group, the side that he had in California was something else, but his kind of regular group at Crystal Palace, some other decathletes not at that level, and how those guys stayed friends with him, I have no idea. I mean, he was just nuts, and that was again. Now it's been recorded, and to finish the story, that's part of where he kind of went from Bruce to Frank. He was just, he wouldn't say a decent word about Bruce later in his career. And so here's a little story. We're at Crystal Palace, probably, it was probably even before he'd moved on to Frank, 81, maybe 82. There's a training group there. There's Harry Wilson with Steve Arvett, and I think Steve has gone to the canteen and he's come back with bags of crisps, chips, and Bruce was there, and Steve had basically bought a pack for each of us, and when Bruce took his pack, he said, "That's more than my athletes ever done for me."
Wow.
We knew what he was talking about. So,
Well, it's always about Daly.
Still
is.
Again, to complete the picture, Bruce, a little bit of a defensive character. I mean, again, long before the, I don't know if he thought he should have been the director of coaching when Frank was, but there was always this little bit of sniping going on from Bruce in the late 70s, early 80s, long before there was any change in coaching. So he was a little insecure, I would say, Bruce, which is amazing because, as I think most of he coached Sally Gunnell as well as Daly. So a couple of 3 gold medals in the bucket there.
So combined or multi, and why?
Well,
Hey, before we get too deep into that one, I just want to say, hey, thank you for you guys for listening.
Oh,
for
thank
discussion.
you.
Kevin, it was a treat. It really was a treat.
I appreciate that. So no,
that's all
thank
the
you very
notes I
much.
took, Kevin. Look,
Thanks, Kevin.
take the notes.
What? Oh,
That's all
the
the
notes.
notes I took. All the
Oh.
notes I took for Kevin there.
There you go.
Great.
Okay, go
Stuff
ahead.
to read up on.
Who's going to challenge it?
Right. See, before we get to that, I'd like to challenge something else you said there, Malcolm. Crisps or chips? You know the difference between a crisp and a chip.
Of course. Come on. He's British for crying out loud. He should know that.
I always think of crisps as
Potato chips.
and chips as French fries, but I don't know.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
not having it. No,
No,
What do you mean? No, not having it. It's not. French fries aren't potato. Give me
no chips.
chips. What are
No.
chips?
Potatoes that are chipped.
Right.
Potatoes that are chipped. You mean they got a chip on their
Right.
block?
Go with
like
fish.
wedges.
Oh, wedges.
No, that's different. That's potato wedges.
Not
Oh,
a
yeah.
wedgie, a wedge.
A wedge
Hey
is something
man,
different
let,
again.
let me tell you something about the British gastronomic cuisine here. So I was in Milton Keynes in 2010, coming down. I was giving a talk at the United Kingdom's Strength and Conditioning Association. So I walked down to the kitchen or whatever it is for breakfast, and I see these triangles of bread. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is toast. So I sit down next to some people and I take a bite into it and I just about died. And I said, what the hell is this? Fried bread. I
Mhm.
can't believe it. Fried bread.
Delicious. Delicious.
And you want real fried bread? Come to where I am in southern Arizona, and the Mexican Indians have a beautiful fried bread is just wonderful.
Well, we should all meet in Arizona.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so lonely then. Come here.
So, Alan, I was just surprised when I was in Scotland 2 years ago that baked beans was breakfast.
Oh,
Unfried
and
bread.
blood pudding.
Yeah, I got that, but the
Baked
baked
beans on
beans.
fried bread.
surprised me.
Superb.
Yeah.
And out of a
It's so-
can.
It's a wonder the Scottish people haven't died from coronary diseases or something like this, sir.
Oh, they do. It's one of the worst in Europe.
Oh, is it?
Disease is one of the worst in Europe.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Okay, who's going to take it? Who's going to take the bait? Combined or multi?
I think Richie nailed it.
Richie's already nailed it. Look at the.
What did he say? I didn't see anything. Richie's always in the
Yeah.
background today. He's moving incognito.
It's
Rich
one
is driving
event.
to Scotland, I think.
Ah,
It's
What?
yes, exactly. It's one event.
It's one event that has several parts. It's multi by definition says it's all these different events. If you and I'm sure Kevin would, if you don't coach it as a combined event, if you try to coach it as 10 different events or maybe 5 or 6 different events, you're not going to get the job done.
yeah, but Kevin did say, and these were his words, that he could actually take Brian Clay at the time, and he could jump against the long jumpers. He can
Right.
jump against the high jumpers at events, and he used to go and compete like that.
But
But
that's
true
that's
of
a different thing.
Okay.
Most top level decathletes and heptathletes are good. I mean, Jessica could high jump internationally. Again, back to Thompson, he long jumps and sprinted internationally. He ran on the British relay team a couple of times. I
Okay.
mean, that's true of most of them. That speaks to their speciality. It doesn't make the combined events a multi-event.
Okay.
Sorry, Richie.
No, I think Kevin would agree with this too. That I mean, what I think Kevin's point was, you have to work on individual events in open competitions, and that was his way of testing. Especially at NAIA level, and then when you're world class, you can compete against jumpers and meets like that. I mean, that's just great competitive experience and great technical experience. But that doesn't mean when you go into the event that there are 10 different things. I mean, and that goes to and Kevin had a team helping him with those different things. Even if you do that, you have to have one person kind of in charge of everything. Our problem around here, we have a lot of athletes in high school trying to do it, and they've got 5 different coaches trying to tell them 5 different things to do and make them specialists in throws and trying to make them a full-time pole vaulter and trying to run a hard workout the day before they're supposed to go and do technique work. You can't do that. It's got to be one completely directed and orchestrated program. Now, within that, you go and you compete in an open event here and there to get extra work and training.
Yeah, and I was, there's, and we can debate the kind of 2 different ways of doing combined events. Just one person doing it all. I always liked, the input of, event specialists, and kind of coming in and doing some stuff. And I think it showed with, some of Brian's technical, how good he was in some of the events, especially a small guy, especially in the throws. But like what Richie said is there definitely needs to be one person in charge of that whole thing. And I remember talking, there's a real good girl out of Colorado. She's down in Georgia now. And I remember talking with, with her and her dad about that, because there was a lot of input kind of coming her way, kind of her last couple of years of high school. And, I just remember emphasizing to him that, that's all great. And I'm good with, you seeking out, specialists, in different events, but there does have to be, one person that's driving that ship.
Anna Hall.
Yeah, and I think
I bet Anna Hall probably had 20 people saying they were her coach.
Yeah. And I think that specialist coach has to appreciate or understand they are not coaching the person to be a pole vaulter, or they're not coaching the high jumper to be or javelin thrower to be a javelin thrower. It's got to be within the context of the 10 or the 7 events.
Well, that was why I led with my first question with Kevin was, did Kevin compete as a decathlete? I mean, it wouldn't make sense for Kevin to be a high jumper and then taking, Brian Clay as a decathlete to compete and coach, because he had to have the knowledge of being able to do or coach the 10 events, which is very important.
And I think one thing that's difficult here in the United States anyway, especially post-collegiately, is for athletes, especially multi-eventers, to find an event. You know, lucky Richie's got some stuff that down in Texas they run every single year, but in the Northeast, there is almost zero opportunity to run in a decathlon. We have like one here in New Jersey in the summer, and that's it. You know, and it's tough to get into them. So you do go to meets and jump in maybe the pole vault and the long jump in one meet and do the 100 and you know, another event and another meet, just so you've got practice competing in those events.
Yeah.
And I think that was the whole reason behind the development of GOTSIS, with to have like an event just for the decathletes to be able to meet.
Oh yeah, that's combined event heaven, that place. I mean, it's even more than combined events. It's, you know, I've said to a number of people, if you just like athletics, if you just like track and field, you should go to it just one time, because they're you know, we know they're professional athletes, we know everything they're involved, but there's actually a pureness about the whole event that I mean, I haven't got to see anywhere else.
Oh, well, hey, another great conversation. Thanks, Kevin. This has been fantastic. So I want to end off wishing every one of you guys a very, very Merry Christmas.
So we're not doing next week?
Oh, we're doing next week.
Oh, okay.
We're doing next week. You can bring your ponytail and your long hair next week. Don't worry about it.
I've been looking for pictures desperately. I can't find one, but from the way pictures, that'll remain.
I'll dig up some old photos of me looking like Jim Morrison.
There you go. Right,
But this is not the end, Malcolm. This is not the end.
Rather you than me.
All right, guys.
Merry
Have a
Christmas,
good Christmas
everybody.
with the family, and catch you guys on the 30th.
Merry Christmas, guys. Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Kevin. That was
Thanks,
brilliant.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Great work, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Merry
Bye,
Christmas.
guys.
Stay safe.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Richie. Drive safely, man.
Thanks, Richie.
I think Richie's actually driving to Scotland.